This is the skill video for Unit 2, Skill 1, covering angle classifications. Now, when we're talking about a single angle, it can fall into three basic categories. So let's start with writing a single angle can be. Okay, we've got three categories. We could have an acute angle. We could have a right angle. And we could have an obtuse angle. Okay, and these words might be familiar to you. So let's talk about what each of these mean and draw a quick picture to go with them. So an acute angle would look something like this. Okay, where these two lines come together and meet at a point. Okay, the point here where they meet is called the vertex, and the two sides are called rays, because each one of them goes out forever with arrows at the end. And so when those two rays meet at a vertex, it creates an angle. Okay, this angle inside here, and that has a measurement in degrees. And when that measurement is less than 90 degrees, then we have an acute angle. Okay, so it's less than 90 degrees. Now a right angle, that looks more like this. And you would want to use a protractor to make a perfect 90-degree right angle. But we'll go ahead and put this symbol, that little box symbol, to represent or show that we mean that to be a perfect 90-degree angle. Okay, so a right angle is exactly 90 degrees. Okay, so if you mean to draw a right angle, you need to put that box there to show that it's right. And then we have our obtuse angle, and this is greater than or more than a 90-degree angle. So the top part, that second ray, right, it needs to open up wider than that 90-degree angle. So that right in here, it's now more than 90 degrees. So those are our three categories for a single angle. Now I might ask you to draw some angles and to label them. So let's look at these three examples. Number one, if I ask you to draw an acute angle, and I'm going to label it, we're going to label it angle A. Now the notation, or the symbol for angle, is just a little, kind of like a side V. It's like a little acute angle. Okay, so draw acute angle. We're going to call this, or label it angle A. So the angle that we would draw here, we would want to make sure it's less than 90 degrees, and you could do a lot of different angles that look like that, but here would be an example of an angle that's less than 90 degrees, and if we want to label it angle A, you label its vertex. So you would put an A right there. It's representing kind of the point where those two rays are meeting. So that would be the picture that you would draw. In a second example, let's say you were asked to draw an obtuse angle, and we'll call it angle 7. Okay, that sometimes angles are numbered, and so here would be a way to do that. Now I want it to be more than 90 degrees. Okay, so this might be an example of what you draw as your obtuse angle. And then typically when we're numbering an angle, it goes on the inside. Okay, so it's numbering the inside of where that angle is instead of the outside at the vertex. And then a third example, if you were asked to draw a right angle. Okay, now this time, let's say we give an angle 3 letters, angle A, B, C. This is very common when labeling angles. So first of all, I need to draw a right angle, a 90-degree angle. So something like this. And of course I need to put that little box there to represent the 90 degrees. Now to correctly label this, I need to give it, each A, B, and C represents a point, okay? Now this middle letter of the 3 always is the label for the vertex, okay? That has to be B. A and C represent points, one on each ray. Okay, so for example, 1 point here could be A, and 1 point here could be C. So notice that in order, we're labeling it A, B, and then C. Okay, and if you were to connect those dots in that order, you would create the 90-degree angle. Now let's talk about how we would classify pairs of angles. So 2 angles together, like what their relationship is to one another. Okay, so for our second bit of notes, let's say, a pair of angles can be, and there are 4 pairs of angles that I'd like to focus on. So I'm just going to make a chart here of what those are. Okay? Now, one name that you might be familiar with is called complementary angles. So I'm going to put that name here. Okay, so not spelled compliment like you're praising somebody or saying something nice about them, but complementary, like 2 things that kind of go well together. They complement one another. Now, the definition of complementary angles is that the 2 angles add up to 90 degrees. All right, so the 2 angles add to 90 degrees. Let's draw a quick example of this. If I start by drawing a 90-degree angle, okay, even put that symbol in there, and then split that into 2 parts, right? Come out of this bottom vertex and draw another angle out of there. All of a sudden my 90-degree angle is split into 2 parts, angle 1 and angle 2, and they add to 90 degrees. So angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary angles. Another name for a pair of angles is supplementary angles. And 2 supplementary angles add to 180 degrees. Okay, so 2 angles add to 180 degrees. Now 180 degrees is really a straight line. So as a picture, you could start with a straight line, create a vertex somewhere along there, and draw another ray coming out of there. So you've split that into these two pieces. We could call it angle 3, that big obtuse angle here, and angle 4, this acute angle. Together, angles 3 and 4 create this straight line, this 180 degree angle, and so angles 3 and 4 are called supplementary angles. A third category are vertical angles. Now, vertical angles are straight across from each other, sharing the same vertex. Okay, so let's first write straight across from each other. Okay, an example would be this. Imagine just drawing kind of like a big X. Okay, there's a vertex here. It's creating 4 angles, and these 2 angles straight across from each other would be vertical angles. Okay, so they share the same vertex. That vertex could be vertex A at that point, but the 2 angles across from each other are vertical angles. Now the top angle and the bottom angle are also vertical angles because they're straight across from each other. And those angles straight across from each other have the same measurement. They're exactly the same measure or degree. Okay? So let's write that. Same measure. It's really important. And finally, we have what are called adjacent angles. Now that word adjacent just means next to. Okay, so if you have 2 angles that are just next to each other, okay, they are adjacent. They are going to share a vertex and a side. Okay, share a vertex and side. And they aren't necessarily special complementary or supplementary angles, so it might just be something like this. If that were split into parts. Okay, you do have 2 angles here. Okay, one right in there and one right in there. They don't add up to 90 and they don't add up to 180. They're not across from each other like vertical angles, but these are just called adjacent angles. So maybe we call these angles 5 and 6. They're just next to each other sharing a vertex here. Maybe we call that vertex B, and they're sharing this side down the middle. So those are your 4 classifications for pairs of angles, and that sums up Unit 2, Skill 1 on angle classification.